That's right.
I don't know where I agree with that. I can see like if they're on the hierarchy, your boss wants you to see more money and things. But with your peers, I mean, it's not the same. I think everyone's so competitive and sort of one-track mind for themselves. And if you can pretend all this lovey-dovey, you know, we're all the same and stuff. But do you really think that's possible in reality?
Yeah, it is. And the reason I know that it is because there were times in my life where I didn't practice it, and there were times in my life when I did practice it. When I started out, I felt more like you did. When I was your age, I felt more like you did. It was more competitive. When I was at Yale, I think I was a bit of an asshole, to be perfectly frank. And by the way, 5% of the world are really assholes, all right? However, I think 45% look like they are, all right? And the reason the 45% look like they're assholes is because those individuals are mostly afraid and insecure. They're individuals who are putting on some front. How many of you know somebody that you'd like to get to know better, but they just have this wall around them and you can't get through? You know, how many of you know such a person? Any of you dating that person? Exactly, one is, exactly. Listen, here's my lesson to you. Don't be that person. Don't be that person, because every one of you at some point or another is being, seen by somebody else as that person. Again, I can tell you stories, and I talk about them in my book a little bit, but I can tell you stories. Anybody remember the Bill Buckley story in my book? Anybody read that book? It's okay. I'm not hurt. The Bill Buckley story was an interesting one. I had huge success at Yale. I started my fraternity. I ran for city council in New Haven as a sophomore. I was the chairman of the political union. I was in a secret society. I was doing everything, plus I was working and I was getting great grades and all that kind of stuff. I thought I was pretty hot stuff. And Bill Buckley, at the time, interestingly enough, I was a Republican, believe it or not. I don't know what your political affinities are. I just hope that since you're young, you're a Democrat, but anyway. But the idea was that I ran for city council, and it was an article written about me in the New York Times. And I came down here because Bill Buckley invited me down to Stanford, actually, to hang out with his house. Long and the short of it is I started a foundation to fund conservative organizations at Yale. And when I meant conservative, I sort of meant traditional organizations. My whole idea was there were so many disaffected alumni that, because Yale's a very liberal school, and there's so many disaffected alumni that I thought, well, I could collect money from those disaffected alumni and get them to the undergraduate causes that needed them, like the wrestling team, which was being canceled, or the football team, or the whatever that that people wanted to target their money to, or the the Republican Party undergraduate or whatever. And I started this thing, and I went down to Bill Buckley, and I pitched him on it, and he said, that's a great idea. I actually have a shell of an organization. Here it is, and there's $20,000 in it. And I was like, wow, I now have a foundation with $20,000 in it, and I thought I was hot stuff, all right? And I think my head got a little bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was coming down on the weekends to hang out with Bill Buckley and talk to him about all this kind of stuff. By the way, Bill Buckley, if you don't know, is just one of the sort of the founders of the modern-day conservative movement. He, really very famous guy in his time. He's almost dead now, but anyway, he's still on TV and stuff. But so and you know what? I was behaving in a competitive fashion. I was behaving in a way that I was like, wow, I'm really hot stuff. And what happened was, around me, people began to get a little disaffected and get jealous of who I was and what I was achieving. And with that jealousy, interestingly enough, ultimately one day, Bill Buckley forgot that he made that commitment. He just forgot. The guy's a very busy guy, and apparently he's fairly absent-minded with his stuff. He literally forgot. And the next thing I knew is I didn't have that foundation anymore. And I looked around to my friends who's, because my head had swollen so much, had been pissed off at me, and I started looking and asking for help to back me up, and guess what? It wasn't there. And there I was, standing alone, terribly embarrassed because of all these things that I had done, all these promises I had made, etc., and everything had fallen out from underneath me. The people weren't there. And I've got to tell you something. Looking back on that was one of the most important lessons of my life. The people around you are going to make you a success. Those very same people can absolutely wound you in your careers if you're the jerk and acting like that, and if you're not embracing them and their success. The most important people in this world, they walk around trying to make other people successful. There are two words that fundamentally define all great relationships, business or otherwise: intimacy and generosity. Intimacy and generosity are the two words that define all great relationships. And we're going to talk about that in relationship to this mentorship program that you're in as well. Let's start with intimacy for a second. At the base of intimacy is, well, I'm not going to show it yet. The base of intimacy is being genuine. When I was your age, I was far from genuine. I was embarrassed by my background. By the way, there's a couple of introductions I could give of myself. Let me just put them out there right now. One of the introductions looks sort of like my resume. Hi, I'm Keith Ferrazzi, Yale undergraduate, Harvard Business School, youngest partner ever elected at Deloitte & Touche. On the board of Deloitte by the time I was 30 years old. I then went on to be the youngest officer in a Fortune 500 company when I was chief marketing officer at Starwood Hotels. I subsequently became the CEO of a computer games company that I founded with Michael Milken out in Los Angeles. We sold that successfully about 5 years ago. After having sold that company 5 years ago, I started Ferrazzi Greenlight. I now jet back and forth between New York and Los Angeles every week. I wrote a book and it became a New York Times bestseller in a few months. I'm on the Today Show every other month or so, and I'm right now working on a weekend talk show at CNBC. Nice to meet you. Now, there's a lot of things you might think of when I go through that introduction. Many of you are sitting back thinking, asshole. Why do you think that that is an introduction that I might have given of myself when I was your age, and on my way up through the trajectory of my career? Anybody have any ideas?
You're insecure.
Yes, that's exactly right. Insecurity. And it's insecure because there's another introduction I could give myself, and it goes something like, hi, I'm Keith Ferrazzi. Grew up in Pittsburgh. Anybody here from Pittsburgh? No? Anybody here from Seattle? No? Anybody here from Seattle? Okay. I just always like to rub in the Super Bowl thing, but anyway. The introduction I could give is like, hi, my name's Keith. I'm from Pittsburgh. My dad was a steelworker, and my mother was a cleaning lady. And they made a real strong commitment to make sure that their son had an amazing education at an early stage. They got me into a really small private elite elementary school, literally 8 kids in all of 5th grade when I entered the class. And it was a class that was created around the Mellon family. So it was on the Mellon estate. And what we would do is anytime there was a Mellon kid of school age, they'd create a class around them. And it was basically homeschooling at the Mellon estate. We learned how to ride, dancing class, polo. I mean, that's the kind of school this was. But we'd come driving up in a beat-up green Nova with rust spots, and other people. And my mom used to work for some of their families as a cleaning lady. I used to caddy at the country club where all those kids would be hanging out in the summers. Now, even the school uniforms you had to buy at Brooks Brothers. We couldn't afford that. So my mom would go down to the local Salvation Army with me in tow and try on all these green blazers that upperclassmen would have, their parents. And I used to hide in the clothes racks for fear that my classmates would come in dropping off clothes, that they would see me. One day, Connie Semler found Armour Mellon's name written in the back of my jacket, and of course told everybody in the school, that I was buying my clothes from a nearly new shop. Crushed me. And here's what it was. I didn't feel as good as the rich kids. Now, I also learned to hate rich kids, but that's a whole separate subject. Just kidding. Not really. So, but the idea was I just didn't feel as good as the rich kids. There's not a single person in this room that can't fill in that blank. There's not a single person in this room that can't fill in, I didn't feel as good as blank. Didn't feel as good as, the rich kids, the white kids, the blonde girls, the girls with big boobs, the girls with, whatever. I don't care what it is. I mean, there's always going to be something that you're going to be able to fill that in with. The straight people, the guys, I mean, there's always going to be something you can fill that in with. But guess what? There's always going to be something everyone can fill that in with.